very much. And now over to something completely different. I will talk about respiratory diseases and our development project there, RCD 405. And to give you first some kind of background here to the disease. So chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, called COPD, causes a lot of patient suffering. Patients experience breathlessness, tiredness, chronic cough and mucus production. They are also affected in their daily activities, and they have a decreased life expectancy. Actually, around 3 million people die yearly from this disease, and it's the third most common cause of death worldwide. So it has an enormous impact on the individual persons and the individual patients. But not only that, it also has a high burden on society, this disease. It's the direct costs for COPD only in the EU countries that accounts for the drugs and the hospitalizations that amounts to around 24 billion euros. Looking at only the COPD drug sales market, that is also quite a big market, and it's estimated to increase within the coming years and decades. And in about 10 years' time, it is estimated to be around 30 billion euros. So as I said, it has an impact both on the individual patients with COPD, but also on society. And what are then the treatments here? Before I actually go into that, I want to give you a very high-level overview of the causes of the disease in order to put our drug development and our drug candidate into perspective. And what I'm going to show now, it's actually a little bit of a busy slide, but I will try to guide you through it. So COPD emerges from a long time exposure, for example, to cigarette smoke, air pollutions, also viral and bacterial infections. And the airways, they are protected towards harming substances by the bronchoepithelial cells. But during a long time exposure of these agents, they can get damaged. And when they get damaged, the body reacts and tries to protect itself. So it releases pro-inflammatory substances called cytokines and chemokines, for example, and that in turn starts the recruitment of inflammatory infiltrating cells. And that in turn initiates another process in the body that in the end leads to these symptoms and the development of COPD. So for example, the immune system is triggered, you get production of degradative enzymes and also other harmful substances. And all these processes, they cause this constant inflammation in the body and in the cells. And this constant inflammation causes the small muscles or the muscles in the small airways to contract. And they also lose elasticity, so the airflow in the airways is limited. You also then get this mucus production, and the small lung sacs of the lung are being destroyed. So there are a lot of processes involved in this quite severe disease, actually. So it's quite complicated, although on a very high level here. So what is then done, and how is this disease treated today? First of all, you have non-pharmacological treatments, and these are, for example, smoking cessation and exercise and so on. Then as the disease progresses, which it does, you will then start the pharmacological treatments. And those treatments that are available today and are recommended, they were actually introduced already in the 1960s. And what do? They mainly affect some of the symptoms, and a few of the symptoms, they're more of the airflow limitations. And they don't really affect the underlying disease or the progression of the disease. In addition, they are also associated with a lot of side effects, and some of them actually lose effect over time. So there is also here a huge medical need to have new treatments that are more effective and actually also targets the underlying disease and the inflammation here. And again, to go back to the previous picture where in the development of the disease, so what the current treatments, what they do, it's actually that they affect this upper part, of the small airway contraction. So only one part of this several processes involved in COPD. And that is where actually our compound comes into play, our drug candidate Arcede 405, because we have demonstrated anti-inflammatory properties on several of these important substances that causes the inflammation in several different assays and investigations. In addition, we have also demonstrated that we have a bronchodilating effect and a bronchodilating property of Arcede 405. And that is illustrated here in this graph. This is ex vivo human tissue, lung tissue, where it has been pre-constricted with a known constrictor, and when adding Arcede 405 at increasing concentrations that you see on the right, on the x-axis, you see also an increased relaxation, and here's the increase is going downwards on the y-axis, but this is just one demonstration that we have a very good effect, and this is at least on par with the known treatments today. And then in addition, as I said, we also have these anti-inflammatory properties working on several different pathways and receptors. And not only do we have very good pharmacological properties, we have also shown in a very successful collaboration that we have with Iconovo that we are able to also administer our drug. And that is, of course, important because you need to have an effect, but you also need to be able to dose the drug. And here we have, they have shown that they can use their single-dose disposable device, ICO1, and that they are able to use our drug and formulate our drug with known and well-known excipients and get enough substance into that and also out of the device. And that is, of course, very positive. And we also know, of course, how to synthesize, and we have a known process for how to synthesize our drug. So, with all these positive results, we are, of course, very eager to get to the clinic as soon as possible. But as has been alluded to before, we need to, of course, adhere to all the regulatory requirements and perform all these necessary toxicology and safety studies in animals. And they have been initiated and they are ongoing. They are very long-term studies and quite extensive studies, so it will take a while before we have the full readout and the completion of these. But it's in progress. Also, we further want to really have a good formulation, so we are further going to fine-tune that formulation together with Iconovo, although we have a very good start where we know it works fine. And also we are starting up to contact key opinion leaders and eventually establish a scientific advisory board with the overall aim and goal now in the near future to go into the clinical development phase, of course. So with all that, we are very optimistic for our lead compound, Arcede 405, and we think it has a huge potential of playing an important role in the treatment of these patients with COPD. And with the overall aim, of course, to improve the quality of the lives of these patients, and also to have less side effects and reduce their suffering by really targeting the underlying disease. So with that, I'm actually concluding my presentation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mia. Do we have any questions from the audience? We do?
Yes, thank you for this nice presentation. I'm a medical doctor. I've been in hospital 40 years. I've seen these patients every day almost, and it's a severe disease. It's progressive. Yeah. So my question to you is, first, what kind of substance is this Arcede 405? What type of mechanism of action do you see? How does it work to accomplish this? And then my second question is, do you think that this will not have the drawback of the inhaled corticosteroids and dilators, that the effect will wean off by time? And will it be disease modifying, do you think? Will it halt the progression?
Of course, it's a small molecule. We have not yet released the full the mechanism of action yet. We have several. For example, we have released some of them. But for example, the impact on COX-2, also IL-6, for example, that are involved in the inflammatory states. For the relaxing part, we know the receptors there. We haven't disclosed that yet, but it is a known. It will work there. So of course, with the question about if it will wean off or, it's difficult to say. It's not the standard. It's not a beta. I mean, it's what we can say. It's not a beta agonist. It's not a muscarinic antagonist, and the beta agonists are the most common ones where you see this downregulation of receptors. For these other receptors and enzymes that we know, at least I haven't found anything that indicates that it should decrease or that the receptor or these should decrease over time. But of course, that needs to be shown also later on. And we have, you say, if we can really inhibit the inflammatory state and also the targeting the underlying disease itself. Of course, there are, as I showed you in that picture, it's many steps and many processes and many cells involved. So of course, but we are optimistic there because we are targeting several of these pathways. So it's our hope that we can actually go in very early in that process and have an effect.
I'm no expert in this area, even if I have a medical background too. I believe that there is a difference in the muscular reaction in the very small airways as compared to the larger ones. And I believe that most anti-asthmatic drugs have effect on the larger airways rather than the small ones, and there would be a major change if one could focus or get a better effect on the very small airways. How is it with your drug?
Yeah, we have used in these ex vivo studies. It's not the really small tissue from the really small airways, but it's still on the smaller part of the airways. And we have demonstrated effects both in dogs and humans and rats. And we also have particle sizes of our compound that would actually be able to penetrate further down or quite farther down in the airways. So that is also our aim to get to the small airways with the small diameters. Yeah.
So with what you now know today, would this be a combination together with existing drugs, or would it be a single
Yeah, that also remains to be seen. Of course, a single use drug is of course an advantage, but I mean the standard treatments today are a combination, and then they actually have synergistic effects also when combining with steroids. But a combination where you could potentially decrease, for example, the steroids that are used because that are really causing side effects, and so that's a possibility. And we are doing some investigations there to look at if we see different or synergistic effects with combinations of these known drugs. But of course, as used as a single drug, it's of course the main would be the best option, so to speak.
Right, and then like me as someone with no medical background whatsoever, just ask you, you said that the aim is to find a good formulation. What is the definition of a good formulation?
Yeah, of course, I mean, you need to be able, I mean, not all the substances have these properties. I mean, they will stick or get stuck in these inhalation devices. And of course, it's also important that you get enough drug into your device that is at an amount that is then sufficient to cause an effect in the and also to get out. So that is then the compromise. I mean, you need to mix it with different excipients, but not so that it gets in and it can also get out, but not with too large amount of excipient, because we need also enough drug. So yeah, it's difficult to define.
But I understand a little bit more then. And yeah, you have this collaboration with Iconovo. Are you looking for other such collaborations to develop your candidate?
Within the formulation itself, it's right now Iconovo is doing that initial work, and then we, of course, once we get into the clinic, we need to have a GMP production, and looking then at relevant partners there. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Mia, for the presentation and the Q&A.
Thank you. Thank you.